Chapter 4. Climate Emergency, Action versus Inaction. 4.1 The Science of Climate Change, an Unbiased View. Climate change is an extensively studied and debated issue, with scientists around the world working to understand its mechanisms and implications. The term climate change refers to a change in the state of the climate that can be identified by changes in the mean and/or variability of its properties, and that persists for an extended period of time, typically decades or longer. Climate change encompasses both global warming, driven by human emissions of greenhouse gases, and the resulting large-scale shifts in weather patterns. Scientific evidence for warming of the climate system is unequivocal, and much of the recent warming in the past half-century is attributed to human activities. The study of climate change involves interdisciplinary research that includes atmospheric sciences, oceanography, environmental sciences, and many other fields. Scientists rely on climate models, historical data, and physical evidence from ice cores, sediments, and dendrology to understand past climates and project future trends. These models are sophisticated tools that simulate the interactions among the atmosphere, oceans, land surface, and ice. They are based on laws of physics and chemistry, and are validated through their ability to reproduce observed climate features, including the warming of the 20th century. Human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation, have increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This enhancement of the natural greenhouse effect is leading to a warming of the Earth's surface. Carbon dioxide (CO2), methane (CH4), and nitrous oxide (N2O) are among the most critical greenhouse gases, and their levels have risen markedly since the beginning of the industrial era. CO2 levels, for instance, have increased from pre-industrial levels of about 280 parts per million, ppm, to over 400 ppm today, primarily due to combustion of coal, oil, and gas. The impacts of climate change are far-reaching and multifaceted. A warming planet leads to changes in rainfall patterns, rising sea levels, and increased frequency of extreme weather events such as heat waves, droughts, heavy rainfall, and hurricanes. These changes can exacerbate food and water scarcity, impact human health, threaten ecosystems, and disrupt economies. For example, rising sea levels threaten coastal communities with increased flooding and erosion, while agricultural regions may suffer from changes in growing seasons and water availability. The scientific consensus on climate change is represented by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, which reviews and assesses the most recent scientific, technical, and socioeconomic information produced worldwide relevant to the understanding of climate change. The IPCC operates on a principle of consensus and includes hundreds of scientists from various fields and countries. Its assessment reports, released every 5 to 7 years, are comprehensive reviews of current knowledge, uncertainties, and potential impacts of climate change. Despite this overwhelming scientific consensus, public opinion on climate change remains polarized in many places, including the United States. This polarization can be attributed to various factors, including political ideologies, economic interests, and media representation. The debates often center not only on the science itself, but also on the costs of action versus inaction and the perceived fairness of proposed measures. It is critical to distinguish between the scientific understanding of climate change, which is based on empirical evidence and subject to rigorous peer review, and the public discourse, which can be influenced by non-scientific factors. To address climate change, the international community has established mechanisms such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and the Paris Agreement, which aim to curb greenhouse gas emissions and strengthen global responses to the threat of climate change. The Paris Agreement, in particular, seeks to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, with efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Achieving these targets requires unprecedented changes in all aspects of society, including energy systems, land management, transportation, and building infrastructure. The role of technology in mitigating climate change is critical. Renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power are essential to reducing emissions from the energy sector. Energy efficiency improvements in buildings, vehicles, and industry are also crucial for lowering the overall carbon footprint. Moreover, carbon capture and storage (CCS) technologies, which remove CO2 emissions directly from the atmosphere or prevent them from entering the atmosphere from point sources, are increasingly seen as important tools for achieving net zero emissions. Consideration of climate justice is paramount, as the effects of climate change do not impact all people equally. Vulnerable populations in developing countries are often hit hardest by climate-related disasters and have the least resources to adapt and recover. Climate justice seeks to address these imbalances by ensuring that efforts to address climate change do not exacerbate existing inequalities, and that those most affected have a voice in the global response. In summary, the unbiased view of the science of climate change is that it is a complex, multidisciplinary subject, with a vast body of evidence supporting the reality of anthropogenic warming. Understanding the intricate details of climate science is essential for informed decision-making. As the world grapples with the dual challenges of mitigating and adapting to climate change, it is imperative that actions are based on the best available science, ensuring that future generations inherit a planet that is still capable of sustaining life as we know it. 4.2 Environmental Policy, a political hot potato. In recent years, the issue of climate change and the broader environmental policy has transformed into a pivotal and contentious topic within United States politics. The stakes of the environmental policy debate are incredibly high, as they influence economy, health, and the long-term sustainability of the planet. Decision-making on these issues involves competing interests and values, including economic development, environmental protection, public health, and national security. The crux of the debate often lies between economic growth and conservation. Proponents of stringent environmental policies argue that without immediate and decisive action, the consequences of climate change will be irreversible and catastrophic. They advocate for renewable energy sources, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and conservation of natural resources as vital steps towards safeguarding the planet. These advocates often point to scientific evidence, such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, to underscore the urgency of the issue. Opponents of aggressive environmental policies, however, express concern about the potential economic consequences of such actions. They suggest that policies such as restricting fossil fuel use or mandating emissions reductions could lead to job losses, increase in energy costs, and negatively impact the national economy. This viewpoint often aligns with industries that depend heavily on fossil fuels or that may be significantly regulated by environmental laws. The partisan divide in the United States has turned environmental policy into a highly polarized political issue. The Republican and Democratic parties typically have starkly contrasting stances on environmental issues. Republicans often champion deregulation, energy independence through domestic fossil fuel production, and market-driven solutions. In contrast, Democrats generally support increased regulation, investment in renewable energy, and international agreements aimed at reducing the effects of climate change. Public opinion on environmental policies is also divided, often along party lines. Surveys indicate that a majority of Americans support measures to reduce carbon pollution and address climate change, but they disagree on how to achieve these goals and the level of urgency required. This divide is fueled further by misinformation campaigns and a skeptical media landscape, clouding the public's understanding of science and the extent of the climate emergency. An important aspect of the American climate policy debate involves the role of the government in regulating environmental issues. Historically, laws such as the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act have been instrumental in improving air and water quality across the nation. However, debates persist over government overreach versus the necessity for regulations to address environmental issues adequately. The complexity of the climate emergency has global ramifications, adding another layer to the debate. International efforts, such as the Paris Agreement, aim to unify global efforts in addressing climate change. The United States' position on international environmental agreements is crucial, given its status as a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and its global influence. This international dimension often influences domestic environmental policy decisions. Additionally, the environmental justice movement has emphasized that the consequences of environmental policy, or lack thereof, do not affect all communities equally. Low-income and minority communities are often disproportionately affected by environmental hazards, a fact which activists argue should influence policy to protect these vulnerable populations. This consideration complicates policy decisions by adding a moral dimension to the economic and scientific aspects of the debate. Innovations in technology are frequently cited as potential solutions to the climate crisis. Investment in renewable energy technology, electric vehicles, and energy efficiency are seen as ways to reduce carbon emissions while potentially creating new jobs and industries. The debate in this realm hinges on whether government should actively promote such innovations with subsidies and regulations, or whether market forces should determine their adoption. One significant challenge facing the United States in enacting environmental policies is the absence of a bipartisan consensus. Environmental issues are connected with various sectors: manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, energy, and others, all of which have different lobbyists and interest groups vying for policies in their favor. These competing interests make it difficult to forge policies that appease all parties, leading to deadlock and inaction. Fiscal policy is also a contentious point when discussing environmental policy. The cost of green initiatives is often debated, with one side advocating for the long-term economic benefits of a sustainable approach, while the other focuses on the short-term financial implications. Budget allocations toward environmental protection or green technology become a tug-of-war between immediate economic pressures and future-oriented climate risk management. The judicial system in the United States has become a venue for environmental policy disputes as well. From challenges to legislations like the Clean Power Plan to lawsuits against companies for environmental damage, the courts are often asked to balance environmental protection with economic interests. Court decisions can, therefore, have broad implications for how environmental policies are implemented and enforced. One cannot overlook the role of individual states in the environmental policy arena. States often have their own set of regulations and initiatives to combat climate change. This state-level action can serve as a laboratory for testing policies that could be implemented on a federal level. However, it can also create a patchwork of measures that can be inefficient or inconsistent with neighboring states' policies. Future environmental policies face the challenge of addressing climate change while navigating the current political landscape. A national consensus on how to tackle the environmental crisis is needed to create effective and durable policies. Finding this common ground involves reaching an agreement that aligns the long-term welfare of the planet with the short-term practicalities of economic prosperity and social equity. The factors influencing this debate are numerous and complex, involving science, economics, politics, and ethics. How the United States resolves its internal debates over environmental policy has significant implications, not only for its own future, but for the global community as a whole. 4.3 Global Accords and National Policies on Climate. The dialogue around climate change has transitioned from debates over its existence to discussions on the efficacy and ambition of global accords and national policies designed to combat its effects. At the forefront of international climate agreements is the Paris Agreement, a legally binding treaty adopted by 196 parties at COP21 in Paris on December 12, 2015. The primary aim of the Paris Agreement is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels, with efforts to restrict the increase to 1.5 degrees. To achieve this goal, each signatory country submits its plan for emissions reduction and adaptation, known as a Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC. The effectiveness of these contributions and their ambitious nature are critical as they set the pace for global efforts against climate change. The Paris Agreement relies on the voluntary commitments of countries, which entails a certain level of trust that each will fulfill its promises. This element highlights the challenge of accountability in global accords, as the Paris Agreement, while binding, does not prescribe punitive measures for non-compliance. Instead, it establishes a so-called name-and-shame system of global peer pressure to incentivize compliance. This framework engenders a transparent exchange of information and fosters collaboration rather than confrontation, aiming to keep the global community on track to meet the 2-degree target. The national policies that countries construct in response to their commitments require both the public and private sectors to rearrange priorities and reallocate investments, ensuring resources funnel towards sustainable and climate-resilient development. The United States, historically one of the largest polluters, has had a fluctuating relationship with the Paris Agreement, which has, in turn, sent mixed signals to the international community. During the Obama administration, the U.S. played a crucial role in the formulation of the Paris Agreement. However, subsequent political changes led to the U.S.'s withdrawal under the Trump administration, then rejoining the agreement shortly after President Joe Biden took office. This seesaw approach has consequences for global climate policy. It affects geopolitical dynamics and clouds the long-term consistency required for effective climate action. National policies within the U.S., such as regulation of emissions, promotion of renewable energy, and funding for climate research, undergo shifts with political tides, impacting both domestic action and international resolve. China, as the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases, has a significant influence on global emissions, and therefore, on the potential success of international climate efforts. Despite its reliance on coal, China has made strides in renewable energy investments, aiming to peak emissions before 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by 2060. Its actions are crucial, given the scale of its impact. However, doubts linger over the transparency and reliability of reported data, a recurrent issue across various nations that hampers the overall assessment of global progress. The tension between economic growth and emissions reduction is a fine line that many nations, particularly those with emerging economies, must navigate. The European Union (EU) stands as a collective entity with generally proactive climate policies and commitments. The EU has internalized climate action in its regulatory framework, with efforts such as the European Green Deal, which seeks to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. The EU's emissions trading system, carbon border adjustment mechanism, and renewable energy directives represent concrete steps toward achieving their goals. The binding nature of these policies across member countries exemplifies a regional approach that supports solidarity and shared responsibility. India, another significant player due to its size and economic trajectory, faces the challenge of pursuing development while undertaking climate action. With a large portion of its population still without reliable access to electricity, India's energy policy is a balancing act between expanding access and incorporating sustainable practices. India's commitments include increasing non-fossil fuel power capacity to 40% by 2030 and creating an extensive framework for adaptation, but the demand for rapid development often overshadows environmental considerations. Climate change is not merely an environmental issue. It intersects with economic policies, geopolitical strategies, and social justice. In countries across the world, climate policies must contend with immediate concerns like employment, economic growth, and development objectives. This gives rise to debates over just transition and the fair distribution of the burdens and benefits of climate policies. A just transition aims to ensure that the shift towards a sustainable economy does not leave vulnerable communities behind, but rather creates opportunities and provides necessary protections. Finance is another pivotal area in climate policy. The financing of climate actions, both in terms of mitigating emissions and adapting to the impacts of climate change, is a central aspect of national policies and international agreements. Developed countries have committed to mobilizing $100 billion annually by 2020 to support climate action in developing countries, a target that has been difficult to meet. The Green Climate Fund, established within the framework of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, is one such instrument designed to assist developing nations. However, the sufficiency, effectiveness, and equity of these financial flows are often scrutinized and found wanting. The adaptability and resilience of communities facing the immediate effects of climate change are also at the forefront of policy considerations. Adaptation policies focus on minimizing the risks associated with climate impacts, such as sea level rise, extreme weather events, and shifting agricultural patterns. These policies are crucial for maintaining food security, preserving infrastructure, and safeguarding public health. National adaptation plans vary widely in their scope and implementation, reflecting the diverse needs and capacities of countries to cope with and adapt to the challenges posed by the changing climate. Technology transfer is a vital component in the global response to climate change. Innovations in clean energy, energy efficiency, and carbon capture are essential for reducing emissions. Access to these technologies by developing countries plays a significant role in their ability to participate in global mitigation efforts. International cooperation and partnerships are instrumental in facilitating the dispersal of such technologies, with initiatives such as the Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN, under the UNFCCC enabling this exchange. Within national borders, climate policy intersects with other sector policies, including transportation, agriculture, energy, urban development, and waste management. Coherent policymaking that aligns these sectors with climate objectives is essential for the transition towards low-carbon development. The interplay of policies across these sectors can either accelerate progress or create conflicting agendas, making the integration and harmonization of policies across all levels of governance imperative. Looking ahead, the monitoring, reporting, and verification (MRV) of climate actions will gain prominence as the implementation of the Paris Agreement progresses. These mechanisms provide transparency, foster trust among countries, and ensure that the world is on track to meet its climate goals. The global stocktake, a process that will occur every 5 years starting in 2023, serves as a key moment to assess collective progress towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the effectiveness of each country's actions. The outcome of these stocktakes will influence future NDCs and the global trajectory of climate action. Despite the complex web of challenges, climate change remains a pivotal issue of our time, demanding urgent and ambitious action. The nexus between global accords and national policies provides a pathway for collaborative, effective, and just climate solutions. As these frameworks adapt and evolve, they will shape the future of climate action, potentially leading the way to a sustainable and equitable world. The success of these efforts hinges on political will, global solidarity, and the relentless pursuit of innovation and equity, which are paramount in ensuring a habitable planet for future generations. 4.4 The Grassroots and Global Movement for Climate Action. The grassroots and global movement for climate action embodies a collective response to the climate emergency beyond governmental confines. It encompasses a wide range of groups, organizations, and individuals who are motivated by the urgent need for action, often driven by a sense of responsibility toward future generations and the natural world. Notably, these groups are characterized by their diverse tactics, targets, and ideologies, ranging from conservation efforts and activism to litigation and research. One of the most distinguishing features of the grassroots movement is its local focus. Local communities are coming together to address specific issues in their immediate environment, be it air pollution, deforestation, or water scarcity. These local initiatives are crucial for two main reasons. Firstly, they engage citizens directly affected by climate change, empowering them to take action and giving a personal dimension to the global crisis. Secondly, local efforts have the advantage of tailored solutions that are adapted to the unique ecological, economic, and cultural conditions of each area. A parallel development within the climate action movement is the role of indigenous populations. Their traditional knowledge of the land and sustainable practices offer valuable insights for contemporary climate solutions. Despite this, indigenous communities often face the greatest risks from climate change and have historically been marginalized in environmental policy discussions. Increasingly, the global climate movement is recognizing and amplifying the voices of indigenous leaders, advocating for their rights and integrating their perspectives into broader strategies. Youth activism has become a powerful force in galvanizing public attention toward the climate crisis. Figures like Greta Thunberg have inspired a generation to demand stronger climate policies through movements such as Fridays for Future. The collective action of students and young individuals, often symbolized by strikes and marches, is not just about protest, but about embodying the change they wish to see. Their involvement emphasizes the temporal aspect of climate action, considering the long-term effects of today's decisions on the future. Another critical element in the grassroots movement is the role of non-governmental organizations, NGOs. These NGOs operate on multiple levels, from local to international, and they bring expertise, resources, and networks to strengthen the movement. Their initiatives can range from promoting renewable energy and biodiversity conservation to conducting climate research and policy advocacy. Importantly, NGOs serve as intermediaries between the public, the private sector, and governments, helping to translate grassroots demands into actionable policies. Social media has revolutionized the way grassroots movements organize and mobilize. By offering platforms for sharing information, coordinating actions, and amplifying messages, it has empowered even the most remote and marginalized communities to contribute to the global conversation on climate change. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram enable real-time dissemination of climate-related data, success stories, and calls to action, fostering a sense of global solidarity. However, while technology enables, it also presents challenges, such as the dissemination of misinformation regarding climate science and policies. The grassroots movement must constantly navigate a complex digital landscape where facts are intertwined with propaganda. Part of the work is to ensure the reliability of the information disseminated and to promote digital literacy so that members of society can make informed decisions. On a larger scale, the movement engages with international mechanisms like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and its associated conferences of the parties, COP. These platforms are critical for civil society to present their causes, engage with policymakers, and hold governments accountable for their climate commitments. The presence of grassroots activists at these international events ensures that the movement's concerns are heard and that there is constant pressure on states to act. Litigation is becoming an increasingly common tool for climate action at the grassroots level. Communities and NGOs are using the legal system to challenge governments and corporations over insufficient climate action or environmentally harmful activities. These lawsuits can compel stronger regulatory measures, lead to compensation for damages caused by climate change, and set legal precedents that guide future policies and practices. The grassroots movement also intersects with other social justice movements, recognizing that climate change exacerbates existing inequalities. There is a growing understanding that the fight against climate change is also a fight for human rights, and vice versa. This intersectional approach strengthens the movement by bringing together a broader cohort of activists who are united not only by environmental concerns, but also by the common goal of equitable social transformation. The success of the global climate movement can be measured both in its ability to influence policy and its capacity to foster a cultural shift towards sustainability. Its initiatives encourage people to rethink their relationship with the environment, consumption patterns, and the ethical implications of their choices. Grassroots efforts thus play a critical role in shaping the values and norms that underpin the transition to a more sustainable world. The grassroots and global movement for climate action, while diverse and multifaceted in its approach, reflects an underlying determination to confront the climate emergency with the urgency it requires. Although faced with setbacks and resistance, the movement's resilience lies in its adaptability and the unyielding commitment of its participants. This collective endeavor not only seeks immediate remedial measures, but also aspires to instigate lasting changes that redefine humanity's place within the Earth's ecological systems. 4.5 Corporate greenwashing versus genuine sustainability. The global climate emergency is fortifying its presence in social and economic discussions, prompting companies to respond by adopting eco-friendly policies. Some businesses have made substantial changes in sustainability, while others merely simulate environmental stewardship, a practice known as greenwashing. Greenwashing can involve marketing a product or company as environmentally friendly when it is not. It's crucial to discern between greenwashing and genuine sustainability efforts, as the success of the former can undermine real progress toward mitigating climate change. The exploration of corporate greenwashing versus genuine sustainability is fundamental in understanding current measures taken to address the climate crisis and in recognizing the path toward true environmental action. The concept of greenwashing is not new. It emerged alongside the environmental movement in the mid to late 20th century. Companies began to realize that consumers were becoming more environmentally conscious and aimed to appeal to this sentiment without making substantive changes to their practices. This often includes deceptive marketing techniques, such as using imagery and language associated with nature, emphasizing a single green feature of a product to distract from harmful practices, or making ambiguous claims that are difficult to verify. Identifying these tactics is essential in holding companies accountable and fostering a market that rewards true sustainability efforts. Genuine sustainability, on the other hand, is rooted in practices that have a tangible and positive impact on the environment. This can involve reducing greenhouse gas emissions, conserving water, investing in renewable energy, and employing a cradle-to-cradle approach to product design. It also encompasses social sustainability, which means operating in a way that is not only environmentally conscious, but also ethically responsible in terms of labor rights, community engagement, and economic impact. Genuine sustainability is comprehensive, measurable, and typically involves a long-term commitment rather than short-term advertising campaigns. One of the most salient features of genuine sustainability is transparency. Companies seriously engaged in sustainable practices are open about their processes, successes, and areas needing improvement. They commonly use third-party certifications and audits to verify their claims. The existence of universally recognized standards and certifications, such as LEED for buildings, ENERGY STAR for electronics, or Fair Trade for agriculture products, provides benchmarks for what constitutes genuine environmental conservation and social responsibility. The disparity between greenwashing and genuine sustainability is often woven into corporate narratives. Greenwashing may create a veneer of environmentalism that appeals to the eco-conscious customer, but upon closer examination, the underlying practices remain unsustainable. For instance, a company might highlight its use of recycled materials in a product line, which is positive, but fails to address its carbon-heavy manufacturing processes or the working conditions in its factories. Conversely, companies that are genuinely sustainable typically consider the life cycle impact of their products, including raw material sourcing, production, distribution, usage, and end-of-life disposal. Consumer awareness plays a significant role in combating greenwashing. Educated consumers can challenge companies by asking pointed questions regarding their environmental claims, requesting evidence of sustainable practices, and prioritizing purchases from businesses with a proven commitment to the environment. This consumer scrutiny can create a market dynamic that encourages companies to move beyond public relations techniques and adopt authentically sustainable business models. Another factor magnifying the importance of differentiating between greenwashing and genuine sustainability is the role of investors. Increasingly, investors are recognizing that sustainability can coincide with financial performance, leading to the rise of socially responsible investing and indices that track the environmental, social, and governance (ESG) performance of companies. This trend puts additional pressure on businesses to substantiate their green credentials and can serve as a catalyst for genuine sustainable change if used diligently. The complexity of global supply chains poses a challenge in assessing corporate sustainability claims. A company may have a sustainable headquarters office, but its supply chain could be rife with unsustainable practices. This is particularly pertinent in industries like textiles, where the supply chain can span across countries with varying environmental and labor standards. It demands that a genuinely sustainable company has a comprehensive view of its entire supply chain and actively works to ensure sustainability across all levels. Regulatory frameworks also play a pivotal role in combating greenwashing. Regional, national, and international laws and guidelines can establish the requisite standards for environmental claims and penalize deceptive practices. For example, the European Union's Eco-label, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission's Green Guides, and the ISO 14020 family of standards aim to guide companies in making factual environmental statements and give consumers the information they need to make informed decisions. However, the effectiveness of these frameworks often depends on their enforcement and the political will to update them in response to evolving greenwashing tactics. Looking ahead, technology and innovation hold the potential to foster genuine sustainability. Advances in renewable energy, resource-efficient manufacturing processes, and product lifecycle assessment tools can provide companies with the means to lessen their environmental impact in ways that were not possible before. With these tools, companies are better equipped to make operational changes that result in significant reductions in emissions and waste, epitomizing genuine sustainability efforts. The battle against climate change requires an alliance between businesses, consumers, investors, and regulators to create an environment in which genuine sustainability can flourish. While greenwashing remains a pervasive challenge, the combined effort of these stakeholders can shift norms, influence corporate behavior, and pave the way for a sustainable future. Every action taken against greenwashing and for genuine sustainability moves us closer to a society that embraces environmental and social responsibility not just as a marketing strategy, but as a foundation for economic activity. The persistence of greenwashing poses a significant threat to climate action, as it can mislead consumers and stymie the progress of genuinely sustainable companies. It is more important than ever for all stakeholders to be vigilant and informed. Individuals must scrutinize claims and support businesses that demonstrate real commitment to the health of our planet. Companies must adopt comprehensive sustainability strategies, ensure transparency, and pursue continuous improvement in all aspects of their operations. Regulators and standard setters must enforce stringent guidelines and adapt to new greenwashing strategies. Only by distinguishing genuine sustainability from greenwashing can we forge a pathway toward a more sustainable future for all. 4.6 Consumer Behavior and Environmental Impact. Consumer behavior plays a significant role in environmental impact, particularly in the context of climate change. With the global population increasing and economies growing, individual consumption patterns significantly influence the demand for resources and thus the stress on the environment. The production, distribution, and disposal of consumer goods contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, and resource depletion, intertwining consumer behavior with the health of the planet. The impact of consumer behavior on the environment starts with the extraction of raw materials. This often involves the use of fossil fuels, which, when burned, release carbon dioxide, a potent greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere. Additionally, the extraction processes can lead to habitat destruction, loss of biodiversity, and soil and water pollution. As consumers demand more products, the strain on natural resources intensifies, making unsustainable consumer practices a major concern for environmental conservation. Manufacturing processes, which translate raw materials into consumable goods, are energy-intensive and contribute to environmental degradation. Factories traditionally rely on fossil fuels for energy, and the industrial sector accounts for a substantial portion of global greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, manufacturing often generates waste products and pollutants that can harm air, water, and land. While some industries have begun to adopt cleaner and more sustainable practices, the pace of adoption is not keeping up with the urgency of the climate emergency. Distribution networks that transport goods from manufacturers to retailers and ultimately to consumers add another layer of environmental impact. These networks can be extensive, spanning across continents and relying heavily on shipping, trucking, and aviation, all of which are significant emitters of carbon dioxide. Even with advancements in logistics and a greater emphasis on fuel efficiency, the global supply chain continues to be a major contributor to the climate emergency through emissions and energy consumption. Consumers influence the environmental footprint of a product not only by their choice to purchase, but also by their use and disposal of that product. Energy-hungry appliances, gas-guzzling vehicles, and disposable products that end up in landfills are examples of how individual choices can have a collective adverse impact on the environment. Products that require constant energy or resource input during their use phase, such as air conditioners, heating systems, and automobiles, contribute to the consumer's carbon footprint. Moreover, the end-of-life treatment of consumer goods greatly affects the environment. Widespread use of non-biodegradable materials in packaging and products results in significant waste accumulation in landfills. This not only takes up valuable land space, but also contributes to methane emissions, another potent greenhouse gas. While recycling efforts are increasing, the rates of recycling still lag behind the rates of consumption and waste production. The shift toward a more sustainable consumer behavior is a critical aspect of addressing the climate emergency. This entails a widespread adoption of the principles of reduce, reuse, and recycle. By reducing consumption, particularly of disposable and non-essential items, individuals can significantly decrease their environmental footprint. Opting for products with a longer lifespan and prioritizing the reuse of products can further diminish waste and resource depletion. Additionally, increased awareness and demand for eco-friendly products can drive more sustainable production practices. When consumers prefer products made with sustainable materials, produced with renewable energy, and designed with end-of-life disposal in mind, manufacturers are incentivized to innovate and reduce environmental harm. Consumer choices, therefore, have the power to catalyze a shift toward more sustainable industrial practices. The role of digital technology in shaping consumer behavior should also be considered. Online shopping, for example, has revolutionized retail by allowing consumers to purchase goods without the need for brick-and-mortar stores. While this reduces the carbon footprint associated with maintaining physical retail spaces, it increases the demand for packing materials and the frequency of deliveries, which can offset any environmental benefits if not managed correctly. Education and information are paramount for driving change in consumer behavior. Many consumers are unaware of the environmental impact of their choices. Reliable information about the sustainability of products, clear labeling, and increased awareness of the life cycle impacts of goods can inform and influence consumer behavior. This, combined with regulatory measures that encourage or mandate sustainable practices, can lead to significant reductions in the environmental impacts of consumerism. Governments and non-governmental organizations are increasingly focusing on policies and initiatives that can promote sustainable consumption. Regulations on product labeling, the implementation of carbon pricing, and incentives for purchasing energy-efficient products are some of the strategies being applied. These policies aim not only to inform consumers, but also to make it economically sensible for consumers to choose more environmentally friendly options. In summary, the role of consumer behavior in the climate emergency is complex and multifaceted. It spans the entire life cycle of products and involves multiple sectors and actors. To mitigate the environmental impact of consumer behavior, a collective shift towards sustainability is essential. This involves fundamental changes in the way products are designed, marketed, and consumed. It also warrants robust policy interventions that encourage responsible consumer choices and promote environmental stewardship. As societies around the globe confront the climate emergency, understanding and addressing the link between consumer behavior and environmental impact is critical to achieving a sustainable future. 4.7 Education's role in climate awareness. Education stands as a cornerstone in the fight against climate change by fostering awareness, imparting knowledge, and inspiring action. The role of education in climate awareness can be understood by examining how it shapes attitudes and behaviors from an early age, and also by how it equips individuals with the tools to engage with the issue constructively. It is the process through which future generations are informed about the science of climate change, its impacts, and the various mitigation and adaptation strategies available. To begin, the fundamental aspect of education is to inform. When it comes to climate awareness, this involves presenting scientific facts about the Earth's climate system and how human activities have altered it. Schools, colleges, and other educational institutions have incorporated subjects such as environmental science into their curricula, providing platforms for discussion and exploration of this critical topic. As students learn about the greenhouse effect, deforestation, and carbon footprints, they incorporate this knowledge into their worldview, developing an understanding of the intricacies of climate-related issues. Additionally, education not only informs but also creates opportunities for students to critically engage with the climate emergency. Through problem-solving exercises, classroom discussions, and research projects, learners are encouraged to explore the many dimensions of the climate crisis. They are challenged to think about the long-term implications of climate change on ecosystems, economies, and societies. A well-structured educational program enables them to see the interconnectedness of global and local issues, enhancing their capacity to think globally and act locally. Moreover, awareness through education leads to empowerment. When individuals are educated about the climate emergency, they are better equipped to make informed decisions in their personal and professional lives. Educated individuals can advocate for sustainable practices at home, in their communities, and at their workplaces. They can also influence policy by voting for political candidates who prioritize climate change mitigation. Education, therefore, plays a crucial role in moving society towards more sustainable practices through the actions of its informed citizens. Another key role of education is to foster innovation and drive technological advancements. As students learn about the challenges posed by the climate crisis, they are also introduced to current measures being taken to combat it, such as renewable energy technologies, carbon capture and storage, and sustainable agriculture practices. By integrating these topics into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math curricula, educators are preparing the next generation of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs to work on novel solutions to the climate crisis. An expanding area in educational settings is the focus on the social implications of climate change. Topics such as climate justice, the disproportionate impacts of climate change on marginalized communities, and the importance of inclusive decision-making processes are examined. By understanding these aspects, students are better prepared to contribute to a society that values equity and inclusivity in its approach to climate action. There is also a growing emphasis on experiential learning. Field trips, community projects, and service learning activities link the theoretical knowledge gained in classrooms with real-world experiences. Students who participate in activities such as tree planting, waste reduction campaigns, or environmental advocacy projects are more likely to develop a strong personal connection to environmental conservation and climate change mitigation efforts. Cross-disciplinary studies highlight the complexity of the climate issue, allowing students to think beyond the scientific aspects of climate change. Courses and programs blend environmental science with economics, political science, sociology, and other disciplines. By studying the climate emergency through multiple lenses, individuals gain a holistic understanding of the challenges and are thus better equipped to conceive comprehensive solutions. In higher education, the emergence of degree programs and concentrations specifically aimed at climate change and sustainability demonstrate the institutional recognition of the importance of climate education. Universities have become hubs for sustainability research, activism, and policy development. Here, students and researchers can delve deeply into the nuances of the climate emergency, contributing to the global dialogue and potentially influencing policy and innovation in significant ways. The importance of lifelong learning and continuing education in climate awareness cannot be underestimated. Adult education and public awareness campaigns extend learning opportunities beyond formal education systems. Workshops, seminars, and community programs aim to keep all members of society informed about the latest developments in climate science and policy. Engaging adults in climate education ensures that awareness and action span across all age groups and societal roles. Lastly, the digital revolution and the proliferation of online learning platforms have democratized access to climate education. Individuals across the world can access vast amounts of information, take online courses, and join virtual communities dedicated to climate action. The Internet also serves as a battleground for competing narratives and misinformation, making digital literacy and critical thinking essential components of climate education. Online educational initiatives must help learners to discern credible sources and evidence-based information in the digital landscape. The integration of climate education into society plays a transformative role in how individuals and communities respond to the climate emergency. Through education, not only are current and future generations informed about the severity and repercussions of climate change, but they are also empowered to advocate for and implement solutions. Continuous and comprehensive educational programs at all levels and across disciplines promote a deep and evolving understanding of the climate crisis, catalyzing a shift towards sustainable living and informed policymaking. The journey toward global climate resilience is paved with the knowledge and actions of a world educated on the urgency and solvability of the climate crisis. 4.8 Innovative Solutions to Climate Challenges. The present climate emergency calls for innovative approaches that steer beyond traditional methods of managing the environment and energy consumption. Nations, communities, businesses, and individuals are now called to re-examine their roles in contributing to and combating climate change. In pursuit of reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions, key innovative solutions have manifested in areas such as renewable energy technology, transportation, building design, carbon capture, agriculture, and societal behavior. One of the leading edges of innovation appears in the growth and enhancement of renewable energy technologies. Solar and wind energy have taken the forefront, becoming the fastest-growing sources of electricity globally. The efficiency of solar panels has increased dramatically while their costs have plummeted, owing to breakthroughs in photovoltaic materials and manufacturing processes. Similarly, wind turbines are now larger and more powerful, allowing for greater energy extraction from wind resources. The development of offshore wind farms has further expanded the potential to capture wind energy from the high seas, where wind blows stronger and more consistently than on land. Moreover, storage technology is critical in addressing the intermittency issues associated with renewable energy sources. Innovations such as lithium-ion batteries have made headway in providing reliable energy storage solutions. However, such technology continues to evolve, with researchers exploring alternatives like flow batteries, compressed air energy storage, and even the potential of using hydrogen as a storage medium. The ability to store large quantities of energy from renewables ensures a stable power supply and enhances the viability of a grid dominated by renewable sources. A promising avenue in the transport sector is the acceleration of electric vehicle adoption, supported by investments in vehicle design and battery functionality. The evolution in battery technology that has benefited the renewable energy sector is also propelling electric vehicles to compete effectively with traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. Additionally, infrastructure developments such as widespread charging stations and advancements in rapid charging technology are necessary to support the transition to electric mobility. Self-driving electric vehicles also propose a future where transportation can be cleaner and more efficient, with a potential reduction in traffic congestion and vehicular accidents. In the domain of infrastructure, green building designs and urban planning are witnessing a surge in creativity. Buildings are responsible for a substantial percentage of global energy use, leading to efforts to construct net-zero buildings, which generate as much energy as they use over a year. Innovative materials such as those that provide better insulation, or smart windows that adjust to light and heat, contribute significantly to energy savings. Architects and city planners are introducing more green spaces within urban settings, promoting the development of vertical gardens and green roofs, which help to insulate buildings, reduce urban heat islands, and provide space for local food production. An integral part of reducing the impact of climate change is capturing the carbon that is already in the atmosphere. Technologies such as direct air capture, DAC, that extract carbon dioxide from ambient air are being tested and deployed at larger scales. These solutions, while energy-intensive, are evolving to become more efficient and, when coupled with renewable energy sources, offer a method to actively reduce atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide. Captured carbon can be sequestered underground or used in various applications, including the synthesis of fuels and the creation of construction materials. Agricultural practices are under scrutiny for their environmental footprint, leading to the rise of precision agriculture and sustainable farming practices. Smart farming technologies enable more precise application of water and fertilizers, minimizing waste and reducing the runoff pollutants that contribute to ecosystems degradation. Additionally, alternative proteins, such as plant-based and cultured meat, offer sustainable diets by requiring fewer resources and generating fewer emissions compared to traditional livestock farming. These innovations tackle the twin problems of feeding a growing population and reducing the agricultural sector's impact on the environment. Furthermore, the economic sector plays a critical role and is undergoing changes with the introduction of the concept of the circular economy. This model emphasizes keeping products, materials, and resources in use for as long as possible, thereby minimizing waste. Repair, reuse, and recycling of products extend their lifespans and reduce the need for new materials, simultaneously lessening the strain on natural resources and reducing carbon emissions. Companies are investigating business models that support such practices, with some adopting take-back programs for their products to ensure responsible end-of-life product management. In tandem with technological and industrial innovation, societal behavior and culture are pivotal elements in the fight against climate change. Public campaigns and educational programs aim to shift individual behavior towards more sustainable choices, such as reducing energy consumption, conserving water, and minimizing waste. Furthermore, some grassroots movements advocate for large-scale lifestyle changes, like reducing air travel, embracing minimalism, or adopting a plant-based diet. These collective behavior changes are essential in amplifying the impact of technological advancements and governmental policies. Lastly, international cooperation and policy frameworks are indispensable for addressing the global nature of the climate crisis. Treaties such as the Paris Agreement set targets for emission reductions, but their effectiveness hinges on the implementation of innovative policy measures and compliance mechanisms. Carbon pricing, whether through carbon taxes or cap-and-trade systems, incentivizes the reduction of emissions and supports investments in clean technology. Developing nations require financial support and technology transfer to leapfrog to sustainable infrastructure, an initiative that can be fostered through global climate financing mechanisms. These innovative solutions to climate challenges are transforming how society produces and consumes energy, grows food, manufactures goods, and lives its daily life. The technologies and practices are here, evolving and ready to be scaled. Yet, their success depends on supportive public policies, economic incentives, and societal willingness to adapt. Although the advancements are impressive, it is imperative that action is taken swiftly and comprehensively to mitigate the adverse effects of the climate crisis. The challenge is formidable, but within it lies the potential for human ingenuity to create a sustainable future. 4.9 Health Impacts of Climate Change. The health impacts of climate change are diverse, reflecting the complex and dynamic nature of climate systems and human health determinants. Climate change can exacerbate existing health problems and create new ones. It can influence the social and environmental determinants of health, such as clean air, safe drinking water, sufficient food, and secure shelter. Extreme weather events like floods, storms, and heat waves can lead to direct injuries and deaths. They can also increase the transmission of water-borne diseases, such as cholera, influenced by changes in water temperature and flooding that contaminate drinking water supplies. Higher temperatures and altered rainfall patterns can affect the distribution of vectors like mosquitoes, leading to the spread of diseases like malaria and dengue fever in regions where they were previously limited or non-existent. Additionally, longer warm seasons and milder winters may extend the transmission seasons and geographical range of these vector-borne diseases. For populations with limited resources or health infrastructure, these changes can pose significant challenges, potentially overwhelming existing health systems and increasing the burden of disease in the affected communities. The health effects of climate change are not evenly distributed. They affect vulnerable populations, such as children, the elderly, the sick, the poor, and certain occupational groups like farmers and outdoor workers more significantly. Vulnerable populations may have less capacity to adapt to climate change and are more likely to experience negative health outcomes. Heat waves, for example, disproportionately affect the elderly, who may have chronic health conditions or take medications that inhibit their body's ability to regulate temperature. Air quality is impacted as climate change contributes to increased concentrations of ground-level ozone, a key component of smog. Ozone is formed when pollutants from cars, power plants, and other sources react with sunlight. Higher temperatures can increase ozone levels, which in turn can exacerbate respiratory diseases such as asthma and can lead to lung damage, particularly in children and those with pre-existing health conditions. Particulate matter from wildfires, which are increasing in frequency and intensity due to climate change, also poses a risk to respiratory health. Fine particles can penetrate deep into the lungs and even enter the bloodstream, leading to cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, as well as premature deaths. Changes in climate also affect the safety and availability of food. As extreme weather events become more common, they can disrupt food supply chains, reducing access to healthy and nutritious food and leading to nutritional deficiencies, food insecurity, and undernutrition. Certain regions may experience reduced crop yields due to changes in temperature, precipitation, and increased pests and weeds. This can result in a decrease in the global food supply, increased food prices, and a rise in food instability, particularly in food-importing countries and economically disadvantaged populations. Mental health can also be affected by climate change. The experience of extreme weather events and the anxiety of future risks can lead to mental health issues such as stress, anxiety, and depression. Communities affected by events like hurricanes, floods, and droughts can face long-term psychological stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and increases in associated conditions such as substance abuse. The psychological impacts of climate change are an emerging and increasingly recognized issue and are likely to become more common as climate change proceeds. The occupational health risks of climate change should not be underestimated. Workers in sectors such as agriculture, construction, and emergency response may experience increased exposure to heat stress and hazardous weather conditions. Heat stress can impair physical and cognitive function, leading to increased risk of injuries, decreased productivity, and in extreme cases heat stroke and death. As the climate changes, protecting worker health will require new policies and measures to reduce exposure and provide the necessary support and protection. Allergies and asthma are also likely to be exacerbated by climate change. Changes in temperature and carbon dioxide levels can increase the production of airborne allergens, including pollen. These changes may lengthen the allergy season and increase the potency of allergens. Early onset and longer duration of allergy seasons can lead to more significant allergic responses and increase the frequency and severity of asthma symptoms. Healthcare infrastructure itself can be at risk from climate change. Hospitals and clinics may be damaged or destroyed by extreme weather events, while recurrent power outages can affect the preservation of medications and the functionality of medical equipment. Heat waves and floods can also impede access to healthcare services, as people may find it difficult to travel for routine or emergency care. It is crucial for healthcare facilities to incorporate climate resilience into their planning and operations to ensure they can continue to provide services in a changing climate. The economic costs of the health effects of climate change are substantial. These costs include direct medical costs of treating illnesses and injuries resulting from climate-related events, and indirect costs such as lost workdays, reduced productivity, and the long-term care needs of affected individuals. Economic impacts can strain personal finances, healthcare systems, and national budgets, emphasizing the importance of proactive measures to minimize these costs. The health impacts of climate change make it clear that action is needed not only to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to adapt to the changes that are already happening. Public health strategies must consider the health risks posed by climate change and integrate responses into all levels of planning and policymaking. This includes enhancing public health infrastructure, developing early warning systems for extreme events, improving community response capacity, building climate-resilient healthcare facilities, and fostering collaborations across sectors. Climate change is a complex challenge that requires an integrated approach to protect and promote health. Effective action requires cooperation between governments, the private sector, non-governmental organizations, and communities. By recognizing the health impacts of climate change and implementing comprehensive anticipatory measures, society can mitigate the risks and ensure better health outcomes for current and future generations. Addressing the health impacts of climate change is not only a matter of environmental policy, but also a critical component of global public health strategy. 4.10 Environmental Justice and Activism. Environmental justice is an important principle that refers to the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. This concept has gained significant traction in the United States due to the growing recognition that not all communities are equally affected by environmental hazards and benefactors of environmental policy. The disproportionate impact of environmental risks on minority and low-income communities has sparked a vital conversation about the role of systemic racism and economic inequality in the distribution of environmental harms and benefits. The environmental justice movement emerged from the convergence of civil rights activism and environmentalism, recognizing that environmental issues are not just matters of conservation or pollution, but also of social justice. For instance, toxic waste facilities, landfills, and polluting industries are more likely to be situated near lower-income neighborhoods and communities of color, exposing residents to higher levels of air and water pollution. Inequitable policies and neglect often further exacerbate the vulnerability of these communities to environmental risks. Activists within the environmental justice movement strive to address these inequalities by advocating for policy changes, engaging in grassroots organizing, and seeking legal remedies to enforce existing environmental laws more equitably. The intersectionality of environmental justice is important. It takes into account multiple forms of social inequality, including race, class, and gender. This recognition has prompted environmental justice advocates to collaborate with other social movements seeking to dismantle intersecting systems of oppression. It has become clear that environmental health cannot be separated from overall community well-being, which includes access to healthy food, safe working conditions, adequate housing, and freedom from discrimination. Environmental activism has evolved over time, expanding its focus from traditional conservation efforts to include the fight against climate change as it became clear that this global crisis disproportionately affects marginalized communities. These communities are often the least responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, yet they bear the brunt of the consequences such as extreme weather events, sea level rise, and the spread of diseases. Climate activism is pushing for an urgent transition away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy, a shift that is fundamental for both mitigating climate change and addressing the imbalances in environmental justice. One significant component of environmental activism is the push for meaningful community involvement in decision-making processes that affect local environments. This participation ensures that local knowledge and values are integrated into policies that shape the living conditions and health outcomes of community members. It also provides avenues for holding institutions and political leaders accountable for the environmental impacts of their decisions. For instance, community-led campaigns have been successful in preventing the siting of harmful facilities or in securing the cleanup of contaminated sites. The role of the legal system in environmental justice cannot be underestimated. It provides a framework for holding polluters accountable and ensuring that environmental protections are enforced fairly. Laws such as the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, when leveraged properly, can serve to protect communities from undue environmental harm. However, legal victories often require navigating complex regulatory landscapes and overcoming significant financial and political barriers, making the legal pathway to justice an arduous one for many. Science and empirical research play a critical role in environmental justice activism. Data collected on pollution, health outcomes, and the distribution of environmental amenities are vital for illustrating and substantiating claims about environmental inequities. Science-based activism leverages this information to push for evidence-based policies that prioritize the health of all communities. Citizen science initiatives, in which community members gather data themselves, empower marginalized communities to participate directly in the scientific process and challenge narratives that may underestimate or ignore their experiences. Another key aspect of environmental justice is its emphasis on sustainability and the fact that social and environmental systems are interlinked. A sustainable approach to environmental management seeks to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainable practices, such as conservation of resources, are also a matter of justice when considering whose futures are most jeopardized by environmental degradation. Activism in this area often focuses on influencing both individual behaviors and broader systemic changes that can make sustainable living accessible to all. Technology has become a vital tool for environmental activists. The internet and social media platforms facilitate the rapid dissemination of information and mobilization of support. They allow campaigns to gain momentum quickly and to engage larger, more diverse audiences than traditional outreach tools. Technology has also expanded the means through which activists can expose environmental injustices, from mapping pollution hotspots to sharing personal testimonies of affected individuals. Corporate responsibility and ethical consumerism are becoming more prevalent concerns among environmental activists, as they recognize the powerful impact of the private sector on the environment. There is an increasing call for corporations to not only reduce their environmental footprint, but also to ensure that their practices do not perpetuate social injustices. Activists often use boycotts, shareholder activism, and public campaigns to pressure companies to adopt more sustainable and equitable practices. In addition to the work of dedicated activists and community organizations, there is a growing recognition that systemic change requires engagement from all sectors of society. Partnerships between nonprofit organizations, governmental agencies, businesses, and educational institutions are necessary to tackle the comprehensive challenges posed by environmental injustices. These collaborations are aimed at creating multifaceted strategies that can address the root causes of environmental disparities and promote justice and sustainability on a larger scale. Environmental justice and activism are, therefore, crucial elements of the contemporary social fabric in the United States. They are not only about protecting the planet, but also about ensuring that all its inhabitants have the right to a healthy, safe, and sustainable environment. As the reality of climate change becomes ever more pressing, the work of activists in emphasizing the importance of justice in environmental policy making becomes increasingly urgent. The challenge lies not only in raising awareness and advocating for change, but in actually achieving the systemic and behavioral transformations necessary for a just and sustainable future for all.